depend heavily on your resolve to maintain the sanctity of your profession and your independence as the fourth estate. If I may say so, as we celebrate this landmark anniversary, let it be a call to all journalists to rise to the occasion, to uphold the values that have defined your noble profession, and to hopefully continue to be the beacon of hope and accountability our nation needs. Your association's inception came at a very pivotal time as Ghana stood on the verge of defining its future, breaking free from colonial domination. The association, predating even our nation's independence, became the crucible within which the fervent hopes and aspirations of a people were nurtured and expressed. Even before the formation of your association, nationalists like J.B. Dankwa, Kwame Nkrumah, Kofi Bacha, Eric Heyman, Kofi Bakon, T.D. Bafo, Kofi Bedu, amongst others, stood at the vanguard of the struggle, wielding the might of the pen and the unwavering spirit of truth as they used their voices for advocacy. Dreams of a liberated and thriving Ghana were expressed through purposeful writing and careful dissemination on the pain of punishment. These were patriots, men who were inspired and motivated by the ideals of a free and prosperous nation. Mr. Chairman, today, as we traverse the sands of time and reminisce the jubilation of independence through the trials of military regimes, through sometimes rancorous, other times harmonious ebb and flow of democracy, we find the essence of journalism tested and exalted. The courage, the sacrifice, the unwavering commitment of your members have not only chronicled our nation's history, but they have been instrumental in shaping its discourse. Insightful and courageous citizens like Cameron Dodo, PAV Ansa, Kweku Bakon, Betsy Pratt, Kwame Karikari, Kojo Yanka, Christine Agre, Elvis Aye, Sam Ade Clark, Cabral Blay Amihir, Elizabeth Ohene, Heronata, Kwame Amamo, Mike Egan, Vida Kranti Asante, Giftia Fenidazi, and many others have paved the way for many today. We observe a landscape altered by the winds of change. The once famous united front of objectivity and patriotism appears to some fragmented by the device of partisanship and the shadows of materialism. The noble quest for truth now competes with the allure of political patronage and its material rewards, a phenomenon which, if I may say so, threatens the sanctity of your independence, the fourth estate. Yet, this is the period when the vigilance of the fourth estate is most needed. As we stand on the precipice of yet another electoral milestone, which in my view is the most consequential, the ethos, the echoes of past violence, the whispers of disenfranchisement looms. And I don't think anyone needs reminding that the conduct of the electoral exercise, together with its outcome, is so important that the nation cannot afford bias and unprofessional coverage of it by members of your profession. I wish, Mr. Chairman, I could be more confident that the coverage will be professional, but I'm afraid I can't, given the rather unserious way in which another very important national issue, the most egregious abuse of the rights of millions whose livelihood has been decimated completely by galamsey operations, has been treated by your profession. I don't know whether you are exhausted and indeed frustrated by the shameful lack of decisive action from the authorities to your interventions. All I know is that your association's pen, which is your weapon, has gone eerily silent on this all-important matter. I would have liked to see a more concerted and sustained action from you. Sadly, that has not been the case. Galamsey doesn't make the headlines anymore, and yet the country is experiencing the ravages of this terrible phenomenon every day. The alarming increase in kidney and liver diseases, the increase in children born with deformities, and the alarming infant mortality rates in the areas affected by galamsey activities appear not to merit your sustained concern. What a shame. What a pity. As journalists, the times we live in beckon you to remember your purpose, your power, and your responsibility. Let me just say this. The price of your continued silence is too grave to fathom. Mr. Chairman, it is in this moment of reflection and anticipation that the immortal words of Ephraim Amos' composition, Yen Ara Assassini, resound with unparalleled relevance. The composition resonates today deeply. Its message of patriotism, stewardship, and unity echoes the ideals that all of us must champion. As guardians of the public conscience, you are called to rise above the frail, to champion the cause of truth, justice, and national unity. The perceived weaponization of state agencies against opponents, the creeping assault on the freedom of the press, the perceived lack of trust of the dispensation of justice, and the pathetic lack of accountability in the protection of the public press. This is a time, ladies and gentlemen, for patriots to find their voices. This is a time to be fearless and courageous. We cannot and must not compromise on our defense of the national interest. Trust, they say, but verify. And when you have your who, what, where, why, and how, do not be afraid to publish the truth. It is better to tell the truth that offends than look on timidly, sheepishly, and cowardly as the case in the country's interest is captured for the benefit of the few. The success of our attempt at a democratic order, Mr. Chairman, will depend crucially on how free our press is. In the words of Walter Cronkite, I quote, "Freedom of the press is not just important to democracy, it is democracy."
Thank you for staying with us. This is the AM show. And to kickstart our big stories this morning, we're throwing the spotlight on the fourth estate. I'm talking about the media. How we fared this year. How we enhanced the quality of an institution that has survived some 75 years and counting. And this morning, I'm particularly pleased because I have my seniors here that I'm going to be sharing the same platform with. Israel Laya, he's a broadcaster and executive head, Influencer Africa. There's also Martha Aqua, editor at Doom TV. She'll be joining the conversation. There's Mercy Ajabeng, communications specialist and gender advocate. And via Zoom, we're joined by Sulemana Brima. He's executive director, Media Foundation for West Africa. Thank you all for joining the conversation. Let me start with Sulemana on Zoom, just to be sure that he's on with us and that he can hear me. Mr. Brima, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Ben.
Great, great. It's good to have you. Thank you so much. And let me also say, Mercy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I am so tempted to say easy. No one, by the way, calls him Israel.
Feel free.
We all call him easy.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Ben. And good to see you too, Mercy. You know, Mercy used to be with us. Yeah. Well, she used to be with Multimedia. I'm saying Mercy used to be with us.
So the bigger umbrella.
And good morning to Sulemana too.
Yeah, good morning, Sule.
Let me start with... Right. Let me start with you, Mercy. They say ladies first. If you reflect on 2024, the media, and everything in between, what would be your general reflection of how the media has fared? The good, the bad, the ugly, the perception, and everything in between. Just brief comments on those before we situate the conversation further.
I think that given the background the Ghanaian media has operated within, the challenges, the limitations, and all the other things, I think the media has done well. There have been a few infractions, but generally, I think that the media has done well in terms of innovation, taking the challenges and thriving, particularly if you look at the election coverage. I think the media has done well. There have been a few hitches, but generally, I think that, I mean, given the environment we have operated in, the challenges, the limitation, particularly attacks on journalists or media professionals, and all that has happened, I think that the media has done well, though there's room for improvement.
Israel.
Well, I would say there's a lot of room for improvement. I also appreciate the circumstances within which, or the context within which the media has had to operate. I keep saying that the media happens to be we are called the fourth estate of the realm, but we're the only estate of the realm that doesn't get or benefit from the largesse of the state. Yeah. So we have the executive living large, we have the parliamentarians claiming what they want, and the judiciary, but then the media. So under the circumstances, yes, we're challenged, but this is what we have decided to do. And so we must, no matter what, figure out or find out how we can reinvent ourselves or reinvent the media so that we can continue to stay relevant and do what is expected of us. So there's a lot of room for improvement. That's
a lot of room for improvement. And in this conversation, I'm going to let us cut incisively, because when you're doing surgery, it must be done well.
Absolutely.
And we're talking about ourselves here, but really, what is ill must be spoken of. Yes. Clearly, because if you don't address problems, you don't build, you don't go forward. Yeah. Let me bring in Sulemana Brima. Sule, Mr. Brima, what would you say? How would you say the media has fared in this year, 2024?
Well, Ben, I think what colleagues have said is a true reflection of what we've gone through as a media sector in the course of 2024. There have been ups and downs. In terms of the environment around freedoms, things have not been so smooth. And therefore, you can understand when a lot more critical journalism is not being done. Sometimes people say, well, I mean, when you do it, what happens? But a lot more journalists wouldn't also want to use themselves for experimentation in terms of what will happen. If you go to Burkina, Mali, Niger right now, a lot of critical journalism is not being done, not because the journalists don't want to do it, but they know the repercussions of doing so. And I think that in the last couple of years, things have not been so easy for journalists who would want to do critical journalism. In terms of the regulatory space, the RTI law continues to be underutilized by media, and I think that a lot more can be done. The Commission has been quite assertive, even though, yes, on a number of occasions, there can be frustrations here and there. But of course, before the RTI law, we were doing investigative journalism, and the law basically came in to enhance what we were already doing. So whatever little that the law would add is something that we must tap into. And I think that we are utilizing that. Still within the regulatory space, I think that we've seen, for example, a recent development where courts are granting ex parte in terms of what I would call pre-publication censorship. Somebody runs to court to say that there's a story to be done about me, and I need the court to stop the media house from doing that. And the court grants that. That for me is quite weird, but we've seen that happen. The economics of the media remains quite a difficult one, and that's a global problem. And so we need to also appreciate the little that the media are able to do, or journalists are able to do, because they do that sometimes without budget. So the economics of things is quite a complex and a difficult one. And then, of course, the terrain continues to change. Relevant skills in the past are becoming quite obsolete, and new skills have to be developed all the time, especially within the context of technology. And so in terms of capacity of our journalists, there's still a lot more to be done. Other than that, I mean, the coverage of elections, as a colleague has already mentioned, I think that the media did a fantastic job in the just last elections within difficult circumstances. At some point, there had to be a battle to get the EC to grant more accreditations or to open up the accreditation process. It takes a lot of resources to be able to deploy. And even within the economic constraints, we saw media houses such as Multimedia doing a great and a fantastic job on covering the elections. So I think that generally the media have done quite well.
Thank you, Sulemana. Let me come into the studio now. Martha Krenzel-Akwa is head of news with the Adom Brands.
Hello.
Thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you.
We're assessing the media, and we're asking, how have we fared in 2024? From where you sit?
We've done very well. The media, I will actually congratulate every member of the press in Ghana because we set a standard for ourselves, and I think we've outdone ourselves this year. Being an election year, thinking through what has happened through the year, the election is just recent, so it's easy for us to just look back and assess ourselves and say we've done very well. But if you go a bit into the year, let's say around October, with the Democracy Hub protests and how the media covered it, you saw the media moving from just covering to, at a point, advocacy. And I think that is where the media in Ghana is shifting to. And that means that the media is not just there to take press releases, to take statements and just air them. The media is probing more. The media is asking questions. For instance, when the police made some arrests, media asked questions about why, because they have the right to protest and all other things. So I think, if you ask me, we've done so well that we need to be commended. There's room for improvement, but looking at what we've done over the years, this is our best for me so far.
And yes, you mentioned the elections.
You disagree?
I want to disagree. It's our best. So far, I think we've seen much better years.
Yeah.
Which years come to mind, for example?
Well, I'd go back to 2016.
Okay.
And in
another momentous election.
Yes, you know, and I'm concerned more because of the quality of personnel we're having. Yes, we have had challenges. Sulemana Prima mentioned them, the economics of the media and all of that. So I can concede, but I'll disagree that this is our best.
Okay, so let's do this. And we're not here to do praise and worship.
No,
we're not here to sing from one hymn sheet. And honestly, today, as we planned this conversation, I also wanted us to come here. Look, in the media, sometimes it is said that, oh, you want to criticize everybody else. If you can't take criticism for yourself, you have major problems. So today, no holds barred. What are the real ills? Like I started, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Mercy. How bad is the Ghanaian media? Sulemana spoke of the financial issues, the nokofio.
Nokofio
affects many people, but how bad is the situation?
I think that in terms of our lows, professionalism is a challenge because we know what to do, we know how to do it. We are supposed to be influencing attitudes, perceptions, and agenda. Unfortunately, sometimes we have our own personal agendas. We want to skew issues to be in line with the nokofio. We all know it, and it's not helpful because we are supposed to be the yardstick. I mean, everybody should want to find out what the truth about something is by running to us. Unfortunately, sometimes we are at fault. So for me, the level of professionalism. And then also, well, I think we have grown by wanting to be the first. And so sometimes there is some okay, misinformation. No, misinformation is the intentional one and disinformation is the unintentional one. So sometimes there's some disinformation because we do not...
Misinformation rather is the unintentional one.
The unintentional one. Disinformation is the intentional. Okay. So sometimes in a bid to want to be the first, we do not do our checks well. And I'll quickly run to how Emmanuel Dogbevi of Ghana Business News was able to call out the Chef Smith issue. We just keep running at issues, but we have to be very authentic. We have to be authoritative in the things we put out there by cross-checking. And thanks to Sulemana and his team, we now have fact-checking. For me, that is very, very critical. And so that, for me, is a no, because we are supposed to be influencing agenda and setting the pace. And we can only do that if we are authoritative on what we are saying, we have our facts correct, we are accurate, and we are knowledgeable. And when I talk about knowledgeable, let me readily use something as my go-to person. I mean, he will... Samson Ladi. He will, I mean, in the past few months up to the election, and even recently, how he took time to break down the illegality in the recollation of that's what I'm talking about. We must have our T's and our I's dotted and crossed, so that when you speak, people know that whatever you are saying is very authentic because you have the knowledge, you have done your fast check. So that, for me, is a challenge.
Right. Israel, we are meant to be gatekeepers, like she said, so that information comes through, like with the chef situation. In fact, it was an embarrassment for the media generally, and maybe a wake-up call. But as gatekeepers, there are challenges. I'll go back to the financial bit. They say he who pays the piper calls the tune. And we've seen a lot of those machinations. But on the other end of it, if you talk of low professionalism that she mentions, if you pay less, you will get the product for what you're paying for. How do you weigh in on these?
I would want to look at it this way. It's about how long people experience is lacking in the media. Because people don't stay in the media for long because they say it doesn't pay. So people come in, and they would work for a while, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And they're like, okay, I've established enough contacts. It's time to use these contacts to move on to other things. And then they move out of the media.
So stopgap measure.
It's a stopgap measure for many people. People come in, they want to get some fame, and then, after a while, they get their connections, and then they move on. What this does is that we're always left with people who are inexperienced. And for me, I would say that we should be moving, or we should find a way of retaining some people, some experience in the media, so that people would stay on a lot longer. They would have, built themselves, acquired enough knowledge in certain areas they have specialized, and so when issues come up, we can refer these issues to these people. So having desks in the newsroom, energy desk, political desk, and all of this, and these desks must be manned by people who have stayed in the media for a long time and have experience, and who they can, if anybody or any politician approaches them or is going into an interview with these people, the politician comes prepared, well prepared, and knowing that they can't just spew anything at all. But if the politician or government official or whoever is having a conversation with a journalist that they know, well, you've been in the media for just about 2, 3 years, they'll throw anything at you, and the person is going to run with it before they will get to realize that, okay, we have X on our faces because there's some misinformation, disinformation that has been put out there. So that's the way I'd like to look at it. And for me, the way I'd say it's also because we have allowed too many radio stations and TV stations.
The proliferation. And I was about to get there because you're looking at the hundreds in TV, in radio. Even look at the newspapers now.
Yes.
Every other day, every month or so, you are seeing newspapers that have no roots. And they are spewing stories. Usually when they start, you would see that they are leaning clearly either this way or that way. It is clear from the inception.
Especially at a time when traditional media is actually losing its influence.
Yeah.
Traditional media is not as influential as it used to be. Digital media is taking over. So you're having people who are sitting on social media who are having the kind of following that radio stations and TV stations can only dream of. The people who, I always mention this guy on X, Kali J.
Yeah.
They has close to 2 million followers.
Yeah.
Okay, and during the elections, he ran a 24-hour thing that had close to like
he had more views than he had more views than traditional media. And
you see,
it was funny. So it was interesting.
So it's gotten to a point where we really need to assess our roles and see how we can consolidate probably so that we can continue to stay relevant.
Put a pin in it there. Let me bring in Sulemana Brahima before I come back into the studio. I see a message that just came through from Michael McKenzie. He says, on the same subject, how can media personalities accept scholarships? It's getting interesting. I want us to, I don't want us to hide anything because it may be fair, it may be unfair, but let's address them. How can media personalities accept scholarships, land, vehicles, and other gifts from politicians and maintain professional integrity? Sulemana, over to you.
Well, Ben, I think that the issues are quite many. But if I may start from where the texter or questioner came in from, yes, we do have to admit that there is corruption in the media. And of course, the media's role includes fighting for accountability, transparency, and all of that. And that means that we have an anti-corruption responsibility. So when you have corruption in the media, either directly or indirectly, and directly in terms of people paying bribes to kill stories, people paying monies to influence how certain stories are presented, or several journalists being influenced to have certain positions towards certain institutions or certain individuals, then it becomes a really difficult situation. But that also leads me to the point that was already being discussed in terms of the economics of the media and how far people are willing to stay and sacrifice within the media ecosystem. It is true that people are not being paid. There was a time when we did some, rounds across the country, and in many parts, apart from Accra, you have journalists, or we had journalists who were working maybe sometimes for 6 months not being paid. And that's even talking about, maybe if it were today, about 800 CDs or 900 CDs. And even that is in arrears for some 6-7 months.
Sulemana, pause for me. I want us to do a quick roll call. Hold for me. I want us to do this. What he's talking about, where you've been in, and we are not talking about here, okay? But I know in our past, at some point, we may have encountered what he's saying. I just want to do a quick roll call. Has that happened to you before at some point?
Yes.
Has it happened to you before? No. Lucky you. Has it happened to you before?
Never.
Okay. It's happened to me before. Sulemana, has it happened to you before?
No, because I used to be in the mainstream media years back. And I think those days were really better. But that's the reality. And so you would ask yourself, how do these people who are practicing or who are working with these organizations survive?
Yeah.
They're not being paid. And every day they come to work. They go and cover the press conferences and so on and so forth. And to a large extent, what is happening is that these people are basically dependent on gifts. So the regional minister or the DCE or that CEO, or there's a press conference and they go and they get some, little money here, little money there. And basically that is what they are surviving on. So the other point is, why would people put themselves in that situation? The response would be, so if I quit, what am I going to do? Because there are no jobs out there. and all of that. And so it's quite a difficult situation. Of course, there are those who have just made themselves political PR journalists, and everything bad in a particular government or a particular party, they would come to justify it in a very shameless manner. Everything good in a particular political party, they either see it or they don't see it, depending on their allegiance, and they do so in a very blatant and in a very shameful manner. We know them. We know them, as we are practitioners. And Ghanaians know them. You cannot take the people for a ride. No. Even if they say they follow you, they know where you stand, and sometimes they just follow you because of that bias that they have. So that's also real. But I think it was Israel or you, Ben, who mentioned the numbers of media outlets.
Yeah.
I think the two institutions that have failed us so significantly have been the National Media Commission and the National Communications Authority. Now, as a country, we have failed over the years to sit down and reflect about the fact that the media are so crucial for our democracy, the media are crucial for our development, and therefore, what kind of media ecosystem must we have for ourselves? We have failed to do that. So when the Constitution says, for example, the National Media Commission shall take all appropriate measures to ensure the highest journalistic standards, it is not just about capacity building. It is not just about, calling people out and so on and so forth. It is about what kind of regulatory environment must we have? What are the ideal numbers of media organizations that our economy can sufficiently sustain so that journalists are paid well, owners are making profits, journalists can become independent, good journalism can be funded because it costs money to do good journalism. So people say, well, journalists are not doing too much, journalists are not now doing, they are just doing, he said. That's the easiest to do, that's the cheapest to do. If you need the kind of journalism that requires a journalist to travel across 2, 3, 4 regions, with a vehicle, pay people on the ground, he has to find, or the crew has to find accommodation, they have to feed themselves, they have to come back, they have to do the editing, and all of that, it costs quite a bit of money.
Right.
And yet, we just opened up the space to politicians. And the politicians grab these frequencies, not for the business of journalism, but for the purpose of political propaganda. And in analyzing the quality of the media, we lump everybody together because a radio station is a radio station, a TV station is and a newspaper is a newspaper. Exactly. And so if you have a DCE or a regional chairman going for a radio frequency and setting it up and using it for political propaganda, and then we say, oh, you see, Ghanaian media, the standards are low and all of that, we may be doing wrong analysis. Right. And therefore, the question is, how come the NCA would just be parceling out frequencies to politicians of that nature, in that manner?
But they will also tell you that they go through rigorous processes, that it's not just as though it were some fan belt on which they were putting out media entities. That's what these conversations we've had in the past.
Exactly, but then where is the NMC when it is responsible for the kind of content that comes out?
Right.
When people can do just anything in the media and nothing would happen. And then the only remedy would then be to resort to the criminal procedures. And then that also comes with the challenge of, the borderline between, criminal sanctions and so on, and the freedom of the media that we want. So we are in that kind of a fixed situation. And I think that we have to have national conversations about how we deal with the media.
Absolutely. Right. So he talks about it's like a catch-22 situation. You're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. And when I cited my example, for example, in a previous, work environment, you have some of these happen. The good thing for me is that I do other things. And I've always told media people I engage that don't just do journalism for the sake of I'm doing this. Because honestly, this thing, Israel will tell you, if you're not passionate about this work, you will stop. when do I wake up every morning to come here and do this? And you look at other factors, it's out of passion.
Yeah, sure.
But back then, I remember translation work, MC here, doing certain things. Those were what, so even when something wasn't coming from the main source, I had other things. But some people don't have these avenues. Let's address that. And let's quickly segue into this bit about political ownership of the media.
So let me start from where Israel was talking about not having experienced persons in the media because, one, the media doesn't pay. It's money intensive and capital intensive. So if you don't have any properly set up media house, you are likely to be going around looking for what to eat the next day. But we still have the experienced hands. We have some of them, not all of them, because Israel, you're still around. Israel, some say, but when we need you, you come around, so you are around. Messi is still around. Even though not in the mainstream, Messi is still around. Yeah. I am still around. So you have new people coming in. And I get the fact that when I went to training college, we said the training college is a stepping stone. I think the media is a stepping stone for every other person. You come and get the contacts you need, establish them, and then you just move on. If they don't move on to you, you will not get new people coming in. So the turnover is high, we understand. But you have Evans Mensah around. He's been around for how many years? Yeah. You have, I can name a lot of them in other media houses as well.
But I would also want to ask how much longer can we continue to?
Yes, so they are training. I am hoping, but then my biggest challenge is when we lump all of us together. Because you have new media. The operations are so different. It's like when you're thinking of setting up camera, proper studio, doing everything right, someone can get just a phone and light in his or her sitting room, create content, put it out there, and we are all lumped together. No standards, you have standards. And sometimes, like you said, he or she may have 2 million followers, and you don't even get 20 people to watch your so-called standard content you have put out there. And so when we put all together, it makes it very difficult for you to distinguish. But most of the time, the traditional media will be struggling and fighting to do things right. But you have the new media where there is no control. Look, I had a conversation with Mr. Yawbedu Ayeboafo about new media and how we can control. In fact, it was going into the election. So knowing that they can throw things in there and create a whole lot of confusion, he said, we don't know how to control them. So if the National Media Commission, in his capacity as a head of the National Media Commission, he has no idea how we can control the new media. So do I have any idea? No, I also don't have any idea how to control it. We'll keep struggling to put out our content and hope that we'll fight for space. Sometimes the misinformation, disinformation, all those ones may start from digital media, new media. Then it springs forth, becomes a big topic. We're all talking about it, and we make it look like it is the traditional media.
We have to latch on to this.
Yeah, that's what happened with the Chef Smith issue, actually. So those who went there were mixed breed. You had traditional, you have digital media. They don't respect time as you do. So immediately they get the information, they put it out there. And that competition, okay, then let me also put mine out there. So eventually, none of them checked, and they all put it out. And it was close to, I think, 6 p.m. news. And so all those who need to make the calls, and it became a big issue, and later we're all embarrassed together. But then let me come to the frequency.
And I like how you're saying we, because it was egg on our face, all of us.
All of us.
See, when the good things come, we must accept them. When the bad,
all of us. For me, it did not go live. It did not go at 6 p.m., but I feel responsible that I even sent a reporter there who was abused. Yes, attacked by the military men Nana Boro brought there. They actually took the phone, deleted everything, because he saw how they were manhandling someone, and he tried to film. So, but when it comes to the licensing and then the frequency, you know, with change of government comes new frequencies, right? They will be so close to the one you like to listen to. And you will eventually Listen to that one. Like it is not. No, it is not right that if you say there are no frequencies and you have reduced the wavelength of my radio station and you're focusing more on community radio, you want to reduce it so that people can create content and not give people the opportunity to monopolize the airwaves and everything. That is good. But let it be consistent so that change in government will not bring new frequencies, which will establish close to what you know. Okay. So that when you tune in, you hear that one. It will interrupt until you have no choice but to go there.
Okay. Mercy, and let me just add this, that if I had my way and if there was some way of streamlining, I listen to a lot of radio stations I can't listen. I think if we did the proper surgeries, some radio stations wouldn't even be operating. TV and even newspapers wouldn't be allowed. And sometimes when you talk about Rwanda and some of what they do, you know, they have this thing on churches, for example. Yep. They are regulating churches. So some of the things you see here in prophecies and the rest, you try it. You will see something small, you will never go back there. I don't know how we can deal with this hydra-headed monster. Do you have an idea? I
think that the National Media Commission must rise up to its responsibility. It has failed us woefully. And for me, if you look at what it says its core mandate is, it's sad. It's sad. The National Media Commission must rise up to its responsibility. I mean, within the election, I saw some collaboration that it had with the National Peace Council and other things in the monitoring. That is a beautiful thing. But that for me is only a project or an aspect of its work. But no, it was real. I mean, monitoring, what do you call it? Timely response, or reaction to some things. But that for me is only an aspect. And election is 4-year cycle. I want the National Media Commission to get up, sit up, get us the broadcasting bill, be able to, put in the checks and the balances and defend and protect journalists and media personnel, so that the journalist who is going all out to speak to power is assured that whatever I am doing, I'm getting some results. Already the job doesn't pay. It takes passion. And so if out of my passion and my commitment, I am getting some results, I am bringing out issues to address corruption and other things, I should at least be given my flowers. And this should be done by the National Media Commission. And as for the NMC, virtually the same. NCA, virtually the same. They have failed us. And that is why we have the situation we have, because really, talking about the situation, the Rwandan situation, it has been done somewhere. Why can't we do it? It takes the political will, the determination and the decision to say that I am doing this, this is my mandate, and I want to deliver on it. Now, on the new media, whether we like it or not, it's here with us. And we need to be innovative. We need to rise up. Sometimes I get heartbroken when I see how they quickly throw things out there, and traditional media is trying to, ensure that I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and before you are aware. And so we need to learn. We need to be innovative. And traditional media also has to move. Remember Convergence? When it started, there was so much whatever about it. But then it paid. It's the same way we have to look at this. And now I think the traditional media is doing very well, because every traditional TV or radio also has the new media to go with it. We just need to involve more of the young people. They are swift and fast. They're very swift and fast.
Israel's children.
They're very swift and fast. So
he has a bunch of them.
We need to. I enjoy working with them because when you are now thinking of what to do, they're already, I mean, the Gen Zs, they are there. So we need to have this integration where we don't see them as empty heads. You don't know anything. No, they do know things. They are swift, they have content, and they know how to get people to follow them.
They have a different work attitude.
A different work
And that's
attitude.
what we need to adopt for new media.
We need to.
So not pushing them away.
No. We need them. We need them.
We have something. They
also have something. So we need to have that, yes, and just move on.
But Sulemana, on the back of a lot of what has been said, there's talk about the NCA, the NMC, GIBA, the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association. There's even the GJA. Martha made mention of a word, standards. Do we have standards? And if we don't, how do we lift the bar to the point where we ought to? Sulemana.
Well, I think that standards we do. Compliance is the issue. Over the last few years, I think within the administration of the current leadership of the GJA, I think that they've done quite a lot of work, both in terms of upholding press freedom, capacity building issues, and all of that. And I think that is the best that they can do. The GJA is not a regulatory body. It is at best, it is at best a self-regulatory mechanism, same as GIBA, which is an association of the industry. It can do self-regulation, but certainly it doesn't have the power to regulate as a national or a constitutional body. The institution that really has the constitutional backing is the National Media Commission. It tried in 2024 to introduce LI 2224, which was the content standards, LI. And it certainly contained certain provisions that we all spoke against. So GIBA took the matter to the Supreme Court because it was going to have issues around censorship, issues around criminalizing certain aspects of media offenses. And the Supreme Court sided with GIBA and said, no, there are provisions within this LI that basically is about bringing back criminal libel behind the back door. And so essentially what the Supreme Court was saying was, well, you need to remove these particular provisions within the LI and essentially have it relayed in Parliament, and within the time frame that LIs are supposed to be in Parliament, it becomes a law. But since then, I think the position taken by the NMC has been, well, we tried this, the Supreme Court has shut it down after GIBA's completely. And so we do nothing, And I think that is quite worrying. So people continue to ask that those 17 or 18 members of the National Commission, National Media Commission, who continue to receive allowances, what do they do? Even if it is 10,000 a month, we are talking about 180,000 a month for commissioners. And so what way do they do? And I think that people should begin to question themselves that how can I continue to be receiving these allowances when we really don't do any work? And the country or the state must also begin to look at it, that this institution that we continue to fund doesn't really play its role, or it just because the Constitution says it must exist, therefore it should exist, and we continue to give it whatever little monies that we would have to give. I think that my good big brother George is one of the most qualified, one of the most knowledgeable people in the media industry, not just even here in Ghana, but he's consulted across Africa and in the world. And a lot can be done. And I would appeal to him that
he's also caught a lot of flack in the position he currently occupies. He's been flayed by the media.
Yeah, I think he needs to do more. As for the NC, it is an agency that is under the command and control of the minister. So if you have a very bad sector minister, you are likely to have the NCA implement certain bad policies, such as a closure of some pro-NDC radio stations in the lead up to the 2020 elections. I think if we had a minister who was opposed to that, it wouldn't have happened. But we had a minister who was basically throwing her weight about, talking about sanctions and impositions of that and so on and so forth. And the NCA essentially implements those directives. And I think if we have a minister who says, look, we need to reform this sector, and therefore we need to have, let's say, a national conversation about the allocation of frequencies, so that we don't have a situation where somebody is 99.7, worked over the year
99.5
to have, and then somebody comes at 99.5.
Can you imagine?
All the implications and all of that.
This is
Right.
So a lot has to happen. Those who have stayed on, kudos to them, because it's not an industry that is well paying. And I always say to people who say, look, we must have a law about how much journalists should be paid and so on and so on. And I say, let's be frank with ourselves. Let's be frank with ourselves. If I'm the media owner and I'm not making anything, and then you're demanding that I pay you something, where am I going to get the money to pay you?
Sulemana, even the minimum wage, there are entities paying below the minimum wage. It's a lost battle, I think, from that standpoint. But hold for me. Let me come to Israelite. You had a little bite of that. What's your take on that? Also in respect of, Sulemana mentioned earlier, critical journalism and the fact that it is dying because there could be consequences for engaging in critical journalism. Once you do that, you are branded, then some forces are coming up. Sometimes your safety is not guaranteed.
Your family.
What are your reactions? So from the standpoint of standards and then this bit about doing critical journalism, it appears it doesn't pay.
It doesn't pay, but it's also because we're still dealing with the issue of the economics of the media. I would want us to look at it. I mean, you've asked the question, where do we go from here? And yes, we should have better regulation. And as Sulemana has said, I think we should have, it's necessary, it's important that we have a national conversation about where we go from here as the media. I would want to say, if we are to look at some minimum standards that media houses are expected to meet. I'm actually looking at even personnel and the fact that if you've employed people, you should necessarily pay them. Because you go into, just like any other business, you go into business knowing that for some time, you're not going to be making profits. And so you have to invest. And then over time, yes, you're going to make some. But you can't have people working for you and not paying them. I mean, that's absolutely unfair. And so if you can't meet the minimum standards, then if they have to shut you down or take your license.
And that's why I brought in the Rwandan example. If you don't meet the standards, you don't operate.
No.
Yes.
No.
They should. Otherwise, we're going to say, okay, the businesses, they're not making money. But, I mean, before you ventured into it, you knew that the media was already saturated. Yeah. And yet you decided that you were still going to go into it. So I feel we need to find a way to, check the number of licenses. And again, you're issued with a license. Are these media houses that are taking these licenses paying for the renewal, as it's supposed to be? So that if you're not, you're better off maybe partnering with another media house or selling it off to somebody else, so that if we can have a consolidation, or if this is what's going to bring about the consolidation, so that we can have a few that can, because we also look at the media is as good as how many or the amount of advertising revenue you're getting. Yeah. And if you look at this country, how many industries do we have? How many businesses do we have that are advertising? And so if we have so many of them, then there's very little to go around, which is why many of them will suffer. And even some of the big ones will end up suffering. But if we're having a consolidation, then there are fewer media houses, and then we can split whatever revenue is coming.
Natural process.
Especially because, as I'm saying, we're also having new media. And new media is also taking a bit of the advertising revenue. If any business is seeking to do or take up digital marketing, they're not going to find money from any new place. They're just going to look at whatever is going to traditional media and deciding that, okay, let me take some from traditional media and give to them. So I strongly believe that, yes, we need to have the conversation as the media in general to see how we can reinvent ourselves, how we can position ourselves to meet the challenges that, you know, we're facing and the competition that's coming from new media, whether we're going to, you know, go a lot lighter, because that's another thing. You can have all these, as Martha was saying, you can have all these cameras and equipment and all that, and yet somebody takes a phone and goes live, and they're able to
That's
pull.
the whole studio.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the whole studio.
They're able to pull the people. So we necessarily need to reinvent ourselves.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, this will be the final batch. In about 5 minutes, hopefully we can wrap on our comments. The way forward, then, should be what? In the immediate term, you know, sometimes you want to forecast, but in the immediate term, what are some of the little things we can start doing? And as you share your thoughts on those, Israel, I'll come back to you for starters. There's also Ahmed Hussein Swale. And while some may say he's not technically a journalist and everything in between, but the work he was conducting feeds into what we do.
Yeah.
The same critical journalism Sulemana speaks of. He lost his life, and so far nothing has been done. Recently I heard Freddie Blay make mention of the fact that the fact that the murder happened and it's not been resolved by the President Akufo-Addo administration is not indicative of media suppression. How much of a concern is that in light of the Press Freedom Index and all other things tied to that? That will be my final bit to each of you, and it's a wrap. I'll start with you, Israel.
Well, I disagree that the fact that, you know, this matter has not been resolved by the current administration, it shouldn't be a blot. It certainly is a blot, because that's where the buck stops. And yes, you have to make sure the people who are empowered or who have the mandate should do what is expected of them. And so, yes, the fact that we've not been able to resolve this Ahmed Swale issue is bad enough. But yes, because of that as well, there are people who will look at examples like Ahmed Swale and say, why should I, sacrifice?
Why should I risk myself like this?
Why should I risk myself, to the extent that when I die? And it's not just Ahmed Swale. We also have Latif. Latif Idris' case. So...
And he has suffered consequences that he's still living with. And he's not even the only person.
And
you can look at Kilekuda.
Also.
Zoe and others. There's a long list.
I believe that all of this can come back to this national conversation that we need to have as the media to figure out where we go from here. Because as it is, it has...
But the question I'm asking is, where do we start? Where? Just briefly, where do we start?
I would say we should start with the conversation.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I would say
we're doing now.
Yes, but it should
with a more national character.
Yes,
yeah.
You should assume a more national character.
Who should undertake this?
The GJ.
GJA, or even the
NCA may not.
NCA may not
organize it.
But the
so GJ
should.
Because they're
Bring
feeling the
NMC,
pinch.
yeah.
I mean, it's a journalist who are feeling for.
You know how many times he came out to call people out for beating a journalist,
all the
seizing
other
equipment? Yes.
Media agencies like Alma will support, but we need to.
Who engage.
Oh yes, blacklisting.
Yeah. We need to start.
So we need to start from somewhere. But to individual journalists, as you have also said, it's about figuring out how you can survive. If you're really passionate about the profession, figure out ways to make ends meet so that even if you're not getting enough, and many journalists are not getting enough. I mean, many are even not being paid. And then many are not getting enough. It's not good enough. So find ways. I mean, there are ways, and and do other things, do other legitimate things. There are many legitimate things that I did.
Yeah.
I think the question we should be asking is, if my salary didn't come this month, how would I? If you think along those lines and you have other skills and you're bringing them to bear,
other skills,
you will definitely make your way.
So
we have to make it a bit more bite-sized.
I just thought through it, and I remember now that when I came out of school, I worked with someone, a newspaper, somewhere at Domi under President Kufuor's era. And this man is an MPP man, so he set up the newspaper. It's Invader or one of those.
You can avoid
to actually, yes, I'll mention, to actually fight the cause of the government. That is how they start. So when you mentioned some of the media houses, the radio and other things that come up and you don't know how to control them, they come out for a cause. That is how they are set up. When they are able to achieve that, they are done. They don't care whether they paid you or they did not pay you. And so for these ones, you go back to the number of media institutions training people for this space. And so some of them will eventually find themselves there. And as much as you are having institutions that are not giving good training,
right,
you are going to have people who will not get to come here, and so they will go there. For me, you are doing this work, and you need to be alive to do it. You need to survive to do it. But in doing it, check your conscience. It's very necessary.
I mean, if your moral compass, if your conscience is guiding you, you know that, I could get this, but Charlie, it doesn't align with my principles and, you know, the professionalism I'm supposed to exhibit.
I will hit again on what Israel said. As far as the safety and security of journalists is concerned, the state or the government or the administration is responsible. And for me, the issue of Ahmed Swale is a blot. I mean, I think that we have failed journalists, and like he said, it doesn't encourage persons who are practicing and even those who want to, because you still see it in many different dimensions. I mean, all our colleagues who are, some of them will never recover. Some may have recovered. Some of them will never recover. They will never be able to be who they were.
Israel mentioned Latif.
Yes,
he's still living with it.
And for me, the state has failed, and so the state should not let it continue. We should put measures in place to ensure that it never happens. Justice is delivered, and consumers are being different as far as their consumption is concerned. We're going digital. And so let's all be innovative. Let's learn. And if you are a practicing journalist, diversify. Don't concentrate on only this. Make sure that you apportion your time such that your other skills can bring you a dividend, and then you can do what you want to do.
And speaking of the skills, also build yourself academically. Like, do stuff. You can't be stuck in this, because that's where you imprison yourself. Sulemana, you have the final word and we're gone.
Well, I would say that we are at this moment at a crossroads, and we need to have this national conversation as urgently as possible.
Right.
And I think that our predecessors did a very fantastic job. So in 1993, just when we were going into the privatization of radio and television, there was a major national conference that was organized at GIMPA. And I would encourage all of you to try and read that document, where they brought experts together. Justice Afre talking about the legal environment. Professor Kwame Kakari speaking about something. PAV Ansah, the late PAV Ansah, you know, taking other aspects. And if you look at what Justice Afre, for example, said in the chapter regarding the regulation that is needed to ensure that we have the kind of media we need, it makes it so clear that the National Media Commission and Parliament do have a responsibility to ensure that the right frameworks are set up in order to guide this industry. Otherwise, we're all going to be in trouble. This was in 1993. That's about 31 years ago. And we've done nothing about all the very fantastic recommendations that were made in this document. I think it is time we revisit this document and then plan for the future. Otherwise, we'll basically plunge ourselves into a very, very, very deep pit that will be difficult to really come up in the future.
I forecast that we could have had this conversation for 3 hours and still be talking.
Yes.
Unfortunately, time is not our friend. I'd like to thank all of you.
One final bit. It has to do with our coverage of elections, and I think we need to really look at it, because now the political parties are taking polling station results and collating. We, as the media, would also have to take another look at that.
We have to up our game. Thank you very much, Sulemana Brima, Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. Thank you, sir. Israel Lai, our very own Easy, Broadcaster and Executive Head, Influencer Africa. Martha Krenzel-Akwa, Head of News, Adom Brands. And we also had Mercy Ajabing, Communications Specialist and Gender Advocate. When we return, we'll be looking at the petroleum sector, power, energy, everything in between. How have we fared in 2024? That conversation is up next on the AM Show. Do stay.